Welcome into the Trevor Staub Show, episode number 10. Today we have Paul Ulibarri. Paul's going to talk to us about all the things he's got going on tour right now. We're going to talk a little bit about the beginning of his career and how he started out touring in disc golf. Then we're also going to move into things he has planned for the future of disc golf and after his playing career. It's going to be a great interview. Let's hop right into it. All right, and we now welcome into the show Paul Ulibarri. Paul, thanks so much for joining the show.
My pleasure, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, how has the tour been going for you this season? What kind of takeaways do you have from the season this far?
Good question. It's been, as far as the tour, the tour's been running smoothly. I feel like the tournaments have been great. PDs are doing a good job. Players are playing really good. As far as my personal play, it's been bad, honestly. I think I've ever had.
What have you think is attributing to that? Is there something that you can pinpoint in your game, or have you just not really been able to put it together so far?
No, there's a few things. So I've been dealing with a couple injuries that have really kept me from getting to the places that I need to be.
Yeah.
One of the things, I explained this in an interview earlier this week, is I'm like a workhorse,
Right.
In order to be good, I feel like I have to be in the field and practicing all the time. And these injuries have gotten to a place to where the professional help that I've sought have told me that the best call to action is to rest.
Right.
And so my process to be at the top of my game has always been like, get to the field, work as hard as possible, find the game, take it back out to the course. And so with the injuries that I'm dealing with, that's not an option. I have to rest, then I play, then I suck, then I rest, then I play, then I suck. And so it really comes down to, I've been doing a couple treatments, different kinds of things to try to find a way around that process, and I haven't been able to find it yet.
Right.
And I feel like after the next couple tournaments, if it's still, nagging and not letting me be 100%, then I'm gonna have to take time off.
Yeah, take a shutdown for a while. And then that's such a frustrating. It seems like in throwing sports, you typically deal with those injuries that you're able to play through, but you know that you're going to never be 100%. And it always comes down to that, almost always comes down to that decision of, okay, do I need to go full shutdown rest? Is there surgery involved? Or do I just keep playing through it? It's kind of just the nature of the throwing sport, and it is super unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear about that, but kind of wanted to actually start kind of with the beginning of your career for this interview and kind of work our way forward in time, kind of tell the whole story. So kind of just to start with, where did disc golf first come into your life? All the way back at the beginning. We'll go all the way back. Where did disc golf first come into your life? How did that become a part of your story?
First time it came into my life was a buddy of mine I used to play traditional golf with and kind of grew up with. Would go out with his dad and play a lot. He invited me a few times. I never went. And then just one random day, we ended up going out and playing. And my first ever round was like an actual league round.
Okay.
And it was, it was awesome. I fell in love with it right away. And then from then on, for probably 10 years, I never took a day off.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned playing traditional golf, and I know that you have a traditional golf background. I actually saw in an interview that you mentioned that you had, coming out of high school, you had a scholarship offer to play at ASU and then chose to play disc golf instead. What was that like? Talk a little bit about that kind of process, having to, getting that offer, what it was like for you to make that decision.
If I'm being honest, it was kind of an easy decision for me. I love disc golf. Golf was something, kind of my path through traditional golf was a lot like disc golf. I came into it pretty fast, and then I got really good really fast. And so it was I think I'd only been playing a little over a year and a half when I got the scholarship offer, full-time, pressing into it. And so it was one of those things where I liked it and I was good at it, but I didn't enjoy some of the things some of the tedious things that came with it, like going to the
Right.
range, looking at the ground all day and hitting
Right.
1,000 balls, 1,000 balls, that wasn't cool. And the whole school thing, I was homeschooled my whole life,
Okay.
up to high school. So I wasn't very good at school. Not to throw my parents under the bus or anything, but when I got into high school, I was way behind in some things, and so I had to test through and to get up to the level that I was supposed to be at. And so school was always like kind of a thing where I didn't feel like I was very good at it, and so college was intimidating.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so yes, to have that offer was awesome, but disc golf was funner to me. I liked it better, and that intimidation factor really came into play. I've never really said that to many people, but
Yeah. No.
it definitely came into like my decision making and just being like, and even if I go, I don't know if I'm going to be good at it or if I'm going to apply myself in that area.
Right.
And
No.
so, yeah, that's what kind of steered me in a different direction.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. Obviously, with disc golf, the path is a lot different. Really, like if you were to go the path of playing collegiate golf, there's certainly a ton of work that comes with that. Not to say there isn't with disc golf, but it's a lot more structured. You're going to do exactly this. The path has already kind of been set. Whereas disc golf, when you got into it, it was kind of a lot of trailblazing that was still going on. It was.
Right.
A lot different back then than even it is now, still in its infancy. And that is actually something I wanted to talk about a little bit, is because like you got onto the disc golf tour back in the day when it was really an era, and you were before some of the guys that got in, like the Macbeths, the Shoestricks, the Nikos. You got on tour even earlier than some of them. But you kind of burst onto the scene around that same time where the disc golf tour, it's kind of post Climo era slightly. He's still round and relevant, but it's kind of like that new era of the guys that people like me have been watching in disc golf, kind of like the established pros we have these days. And we're getting closer to another shift. But since you kind of got on in that time, I just wanted to know, like, what was it like in the touring life back then? You're a young kid, you're going on the road touring in these disc golf events. The money wasn't huge back in the day. What kind of comes to mind when you think of that time in your life? And are there any memories that really stick out to you?
Oh, so many memories. I mean, some of it was the best time of my life. Some of it I feel like was the worst time of my life because of how hard it was to
Yeah.
tour back in the day. I mean, I didn't have any money. Obviously, I was a kid just going out there. I was working a landscaping job, which was the only real job I've ever had.
Yeah.
And I saved up I think I only saved up like maybe close to $1,000, and I just went out there, to go tour.
Wow.
And it was crazy. I mean, I was in my Honda Accord, and I would just go to tournament, and that year was tough because I missed cash a lot, and then if I did cash, it was the bottom line, like $35 here and there.
Oh yeah.
The money wasn't great, so it was a lot of grinding. And when people like think about like hustling and stuff, like back in the day, that was tough too. Like people didn't even want to buy discs or do anything like
Right.
that, and so there wasn't like there's plenty of ways nowadays where you can kind of go out there and make money, in different ways besides just competing. We didn't even have that, so it was like you either cashed or you went home pretty much, and that was tough
Right.
because I missed cash a lot, multiple times. A few memories that kind of stuck out. Multiple times I had to one time I had to call my parents and be like, "Hey man, I have no money, like zero
Right.
money. Like either I have to come home, but the only way for me to come home is for you to send me money, or or I have to stay out here." So they're like, "All right, well we'll send you some money," and they sent me $400, and I had a decision to make. Like, all right, like this is enough. I think I was in Pennsylvania at the time. This is enough to get home.
Yeah.
Or I can try, stay here and try again. And so I stayed, and then that $400 ran out eventually. And I remember during that same stretch of like really struggling, I had $10 to my name. $10 is it.
Yeah.
And I had an entry fee in. And I remember getting last cash at that one, and I'm like, this is just impossible. You know, like this, like I'm going to literally like die out here. Like,
Yeah,
I can't buy
it
food.
gets
I
real.
can't do anything.
Yeah.
And I already asked my parents, and I'm like pretty stubborn. You know, I don't really ask my parents for much. Never have, except for that one time. And so it was tough. And that one, I somehow got into another tournament. And this is crazy because I was then in Minnesota, staying with Kayla Visca, and I'm like,
Okay.
hey, my bank account's not really working. I made some story up. Could I borrow money to get into this small C tier?
Nice.
He's like, yeah, no problem. Got into the C tier, won the C tier. That was like $130.
Boom.
And I'm like, sweet. This is huge.
We're back.
Yeah. And then the next weekend was the Minnesota Majestic. And so now I had like $130 for the whole week.
Yeah.
And by the end of that week, I had like $20, but I ended up taking second place to Kale that year, and that was like $1,200, and then I was gold.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah,
and
that's it.
And it's like a long-winded story of like the way that life was back then, but
Yeah.
it is. I mean, there was a lot of good times, but I mean, most of it was just complete struggle, honestly. Complete struggle of like, all right, I'm out here. I'm not very good. I think I could be good. Hopefully this is the weekend, you know?
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people that are getting into the sport now really don't understand because if you've gotten into the sport in the last couple of years, we have millionaires in this sport now. There are obviously a lot of people that are still living a very similar lifestyle to that are grinding out on tour even, but there are so many players that are well off that people forget that like back in the day that guaranteed money wasn't a thing, and just getting free discs from your manufacturer was a huge deal. Like it's changed so much since those days, certainly. And I always think it's cool just to hear about kind of those old stories because it wasn't that long ago that's where this sport was, and now we're flying in new recruits with helicopters and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's just crazy to see the journey.
And it was like even the good players were struggling. It wasn't like people were making a lot of money ever. Like everybody struggled. It was like a big happy struggle for all of us.
Exactly. Well, and that's why the disc golf community at this point, and especially the touring players, are so tight knit because kind of we're all in it together at that point. And it's just crazy to see how far things have gone. But just obviously, since you took that second place at the Minnesota Majestic, you've had a very long span in your career since then. You were able to enjoy a pretty successful stretch. And I'm looking back on your career, it's interesting that you actually were a part of like quite a few powerhouse teams. You've been with a few different manufacturers during your time. And just looking back, I thought it was interesting that you were with your stretch with Innova around 09, obviously then the stretch with Prodigy, and then your stretch with Discraft now. I feel like looking at the rosters that those teams had, you've been a part of three of probably the most powerhouse teams there was. As far as when you look at who was on those teams, that Innova team, you had Macbeth earlier in his days. Climo and Feldberg were very prevalent. Schustrick was on that team. Obviously, the Prodigy team you were on was when everybody joined. It was like the Golden State Warriors. They just signed every good player there was. And then obviously now with Discraft is cleaning house these days. So my question was, as far as raw talent is concerned, just looking at those teams in their time, which one of them do you think was the most talented pound for pound?
Wow, that's a great question. One I've never gotten. First of all, great teams. I'm super proud to be a part of all those teams, man. Those were great years with each and every one of them. I think you would have to probably say, it's tough to say, man. It's tough.
It's tough to argue.
But when you're talking about the level you're talking about, you have to go with like world titles.
Yeah.
And that Innova team was stacked.
It was very good.
A lot of world titles, man. It really was. It was stacked back then because Kenny was still, I believe, on the star team. So there's 12.
Mm-hmm.
Paul had won one, but then you had like Avery.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know, man.
That's it. Yeah,
I always question.
Yeah, that was like, it's tough because for me, the Prodigy team always sticks out just because it was a new company and they just seem to have gotten everybody. But a lot of people forget that Innova, back in the day, they just had everybody at some point. And even players that moved on, a lot of them went back at some point. But Innova's kind of had everybody at some point. And it is crazy, some of those teams back then.
I think that when you look at the competition back then too, like it was like Innova won every week. Like Nate Doss would win once in a while. Mm-hmm. Not once in a while. He'd win quite a bit.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was Innova
during
that time. Like that's the only reason I picked them. Like obviously people are talented and shoot, Chris Dickerson just won the majors last weekend.
Yeah.
And our team right now at Discraft is absolutely stacked, and I think without a doubt has the best team right now.
Oh yeah.
But back then, like it was Innova every weekend.
Yeah, definitely. But now, like moving a little bit further in your career, obviously you've had this long, successful, competitive career. Now that you're moving forward, kind of into not the late stages of your career, certainly, but further into where you're a veteran in a sport, you've been on the tour for a while, you've kind of been around. You started to do a lot more in disc golf in the scene other than just competing. Obviously, you've kind of been in a lot of different places and been involved with a lot of companies. When you signed your latest contract with Discraft, not your extension, but when you moved over back in 2018-19, you kind of mentioned that this was your final destination, that Discraft is where you were going to settle in, and you talked about transitioning into, like a slow transition into a team manager type of role to where you would start to move into more of a mentor role, and that's where you would find yourself later on after you were done competing. Is that something that's still kind of in the works, and where do you feel like you are in that process?
Great question. I'm not exactly sure. I have just a beautiful relationship with Discraft to where they kind of just let me do whatever, and I help with whatever I can. I'm involved with a lot of team recruiting. I'm involved with obviously being the team captain. I wear a lot of different hats in there, and that's always an option if I want it. I know that they've been open about that, but as my career keeps going, like I have so many things I want to do within the sport. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I feel like I'm set in a position to where I can really help push the game forward, and that's where my real calling is right now. Obviously, I want to play good. I'm competitive, and I want to win titles. Of course, that's never going to change as long as I live until I can't physically do it anymore.
Yeah.
But my thing is I remember those tough days, and I don't want kids to have that anymore. You know what I mean? I want, if you're talented and you let's say you like win the amateur world championships or something like that, like you come in and you just get paid, and you don't have to like talent in sports is what people buy, not necessarily titles. Right now, I feel like that's what disc golf is kind of stuck into. They really want to buy titles. But in other sports, you come straight out of college or high school or whatever, and they're willing to pay you on the talent that you have, that you've developed over your whole entire life. And that's like something that's very important to me, that I feel like other people aren't quite to that level of thinking yet. But I'm trying to like get it to that point,
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned wanting to play as long as possible. Do you think that for you as a competitor, is it going to be really difficult to let go of that competitive side of the game when it eventually does come to that point when you're too involved with other things? Is that something for you that you kind of dread having to let go of?
That depends. That really depends on my goals. I have one goal left, man, and I want to win a major championship. And until I do that, I'll grind it out until I can't do it, for sure. So, but if and when I really feel like I will, when that happens, I'll be fine. Honestly, because those are the goals that I set very, very, very early in my career. Obviously, I want to win multiple.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, the game's also changed, and I've made deep runs at big titles, so I have like a little taste of it, and I don't think I'll ever be satisfied until I get that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So another one of the things that you've been doing kind kind of in the disc golf scene is working with Jomez. Obviously, you've done practice rounds with them and the commentary. What has it been like just working with the Jomez team? How's that experience been? And is that something you could see yourself doing long term, kind of the commentary stuff and content like that?
It's been incredible. That's the best team that's out there right now. They do everything most professional. They have 20 guys on tour that don't play. They're doing it all the right way. And so my whole thing in my whole career is I've always wanted to line myself up with the best. And so it's funny that you said, like, you were mentioning the teams that I was on. Those were all easy decisions. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that didn't happen on accident. Like I looked at it and I said, no, I don't want to be on the outside of this push forward in the sport.
Yeah.
And so when those opportunities arise in my career, I snatch them.
Yeah.
And so I'm very lucky to be involved with them because of how good they are. And I'll be involved with them as long as possible because of what they've done for me also in the game. I was always a popular player as far as people knew of me. And they knew that I was good because I've been around and I played so many tournaments.
Right.
But I was never known as a personality or brand. And they helped do that for me to where now I feel like my brand and personality is one of the most well-known in the game.
Yeah, that is true. They do a really good job of showcasing the personalities.
Right. And so for that reason, no, I'll do whatever I can for them for as long as I can because I owe that to them.
Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt that Jomez is absolutely killing it, and their contribution to the growth of disc golf it can't be spoken for. It really can't be summed up. It's insane. I'm sure working with them has been awesome. Another thing that you've done that's relatively new is the Ulibarri Leadership Institute. You kind of started that up recently. Obviously, there was a big announcement that just happened at Collegiate Nationals when you were able to give out those scholarships, which was awesome. Talk a little bit about how the Leadership Institute came about and what your goals are for that organization.
Yeah, so there's two different things. There's the Ulibarri Leadership Institute, which is just a website for my lessons and things like that. And then there's the Ulibarri Leadership Foundation, and that's a separate thing that is strictly dedicated to college scholarships.
Right.
And they do both go hand in hand because eventually I have plans for the Institute to grow into like a big organization for coaching that'll map across the United States with all kinds of different coaches. That's a big dream.
Yeah.
But I'm working on that right now. And then with that happening, a certain portion of every lesson given will go straight to the foundation.
Nice.
So they're kind of going to work hand in hand as far as that goes. But the foundation is, exactly that, dedicated to raise money to bring scholarships to the collegiate program or to college disc golf athletes.
Right. Yeah, I think that it was awesome seeing you giving a spotlight to the collegiate disc golf scene because I think a lot of times it gets overshadowed. A lot of people don't even know it exists when really it's this huge entity. You were at Nationals, you saw like there was over 500 players out there. It's a really big deal, and those guys, we can use them to usher into the next era of touring players. So it's really cool to see the foundation working with collegiate disc golf to improve that and give players new opportunities for sure.
Right, and that kind of went in with what I was saying before about the talent that is. Like, there's no place for people to go to, like, kind of streamline their talent, and that's another thing that the Institute, I hope someday, gets to the level to where, like, then the Institute can help coach collegiate teams and be, like, have an actual curriculum that can help, like, people get better, because I feel like we're at a spot in the sport right now. Like, for myself, for example, and this is something that I haven't ever heard anybody really talk about, is nobody knows. Like, nobody really knows what good form is or what bad form is, or like, it's all speculation.
Yep.
To where in traditional golf or basketball or anything, you could be 40 years old, understand exactly what you need to do to speed up your swing, to gain a 10-mile-an-hour ball speed, just like Phil Mickelson did last year. I think he's gained like 15 miles an hour ball speed or swing speed or something. And he's just bombing it out there at 50 years old. He wins a major championship.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I want to gain swing speed, like who am I going to go to?
Right. Right.
Who? Like there's
Yeah.
people that like, might be at home like writing things down and being like, maybe I think, when it comes down to it, I feel like I'm a good teacher. If I can't teach myself that and I don't understand that, then who does? And so the institute is going to be dedicated to really diving deep and getting professional help to make sure that maybe we can find out how form actually works, how people can actually be better. Because I shouldn't be in a position where right now I'm getting outdriven by 200 feet out there when I know I'm as good of an athlete as anybody out there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I have
And
no information. I have
yeah.
zero information on how to get to that spot. What am I going to go do? Move a bunch of stuff in a weight room? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to help. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
there's speculation and people are like, well, I did it this way, but my body's different than yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's this big, long cycle. So I feel like if we can do that and come up with some sort of curriculum and understand the actual physiological, like, intent of the body to push that bad boy out there,
Yeah.
if we can do that, then all of a sudden we're pushing the sport even farther, and kids can get it instead of just watching YouTube. Like, think about how good kids are getting just by watching.
Right. Yeah.
Now imagine if
it's
they have
incredible.
that curriculum to follow to be like, okay, I see it, and now this is exactly what I'm supposed to do step for step. And there's coaches that are able to, like, they're out there playing, they throw a couple bad shots, and the coach is like, oh, that's because you did this.
Yeah.
That's what happens in other sports, and that's not
Yep.
like, I throw a bad shot, and I'm like, I think it's because my front foot hit first.
Right.
I'm not sure. Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you're speaking my language because I've been saying this for years that disc golf, we've been around for so long and we have so many good players, but you're right. There's so much speculation around what is the best form, what is good form, and how does it all work? And a lot of it has to do with, like you were mentioning too, just a lack of data and information behind the disc golf shot. We don't yet have these devices where we can throw a shot, see all the angles, all the RPMs that were on the disc.
TrackMan.
Right. We need the disc golf TrackMan. When that happens, and once we can have the data, we can reverse engineer and figure out, okay, this is the form that works. And like there might be some little nuance to form that we haven't even discovered yet. Like there might be a better way to throw that we don't even know yet because we don't have the data. We can't see the numbers. And when that happens, and when, and this is what needs to happen, people like you creating an institute to kind of push that forward. When that happens, it's going to change the game forever because all of a sudden it's going to be accessible for everybody to get that kind of information, and the top athletes are going to be able to rise to the top in the sport. And I think it'll be awesome once we kind of have that data. And I think we're probably we're closer than people think we could be for sure.
Right. I feel bad about it because I really feel like my game is becoming outdated. And 10 years ago, my game was nice, bro. You know what I mean? Like the Memorial was the hardest place to play on tour, one of them. And now it's a chipper shot course.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I learned how to play. And so my game was molded around the toughest course that I could play. I got really good. And now, that's considered the tiniest course ever. It's not my fault my game's outdated. And it's not my fault that I don't have the information. But I don't want another kid to have to go through this. You know what I mean? And so my big thing is if I don't do it, I don't think anybody else is going to do it anytime soon. So, and I'm all about helping. Like the things that you go through in life, if you're not willing to make sure or try your best that other people don't have to go through it, then I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really excited to see the future of the institute and seeing everything that can go down with that. Because I'm excited for a more data driven era of disc golf and learning all of that. I think it's just going to be fascinating to figure out. One of the other collaborations that you're doing that I was really interested in was your collaboration with discgolf.law. I've kind of been looking into that lately because that was another part of disc golf that I think you and I kind of aligned with, that there's a huge need for in disc golf, is just more legal framework as disc golf becomes more of a business. The money is here now. And just talk a little bit about your involvement with them and how you kind of started with discgolf.law and kind of the importance of a legal presence in disc golf and how you feel about that.
Yeah, I met him. His name's Chris. Discgolf.law. Clark.Law. He actually has a law firm in Charlotte that he runs, and he plays disc golf on the side. So I gave him a lesson, and he mentioned that he was a lawyer, and I'm like, wow, I've been looking for one. You know, I moved to Arizona. And we got together, and then we just started spitballing stuff, and he's actually very involved with all of the foundations and stuff. That's how I was able to do all those things, because I know nothing about that. I just told you I was homeschooled. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so he was totally about it. And like you said, I'm not the type of guy who like thinks in the past. Like, I'm always thinking in the future. And 100%, the fact that kids these days don't have lawyers involved with their contract negotiations is mind-boggling to me. And the fact that we have a lot of speculation every single year when people re-sign and want to get out of contracts and they don't know if they can and all this stuff, that stuff's dangerous. It's dangerous for your career. It's dangerous for your reputation, because then you look kind of silly. You don't look educated. And none of that has to happen. Like, one thing that I like to tell people is, it's just a different language that you don't know. It doesn't necessarily make you stupid. It's just a language you don't know.
Right.
And so you hire somebody who understands the language, and then they can interpret it back and forth to you. They can give you the information you need and make sure you don't stub your foot on the way through. Because at this point, you know, I just signed a big-time contract with Discraft to where that used to be just like, all right, good deal. But now it's a number. Now it's a number to where I'm like, I ain't shaking your hand. You know?
Right.
I love you, but I'm not shaking your hand.
Yeah.
Like thing, because that's a number that's like, it's too big for people to like, just, you know.
You can't leave it up to chance.
Their mom who's like a cook.
Yeah.
Do it for them. Like, that's not what you do. Like, I don't understand that. I think that as the game moves forward, more and more people will get involved. Chris is amazing. If you have any legal questions, I would suggest calling him or emailing him probably, and he can get you set up. I mean, he helped me get a patent on my logo, for example. He helped me do things with my institute, legally do the things with the foundation, because there's a lot of stuff that goes in with a foundation.
Yeah.
That is like crazy to me. I didn't even know was a thing, documents and all this stuff. And yeah, it's important. It's very important for you to make sure at this point in your life and career that whatever it is, that you have the correct information, you understand that language to a T. Otherwise, you could screw yourself in the long run, and that's something I don't want for people. And
and I was gonna.
Sorry to interrupt, but
now,
we're in a like you said, a tight knit sport to where it hasn't really gone head to head yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But eventually, there's going to be a time where there's millions of dollars at stake. This guy ain't going to give up, and this guy ain't going to give up, and it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's not going to be pretty.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering, since you've been around on the tour, like, how many times have you seen it? Has it been kind of over and over again where either a player or a company has been taken advantage of and really kind of lost out on something because of something they didn't know with their contract or something that wasn't upheld?
I promise you this. If you're signing a contract without a lawyer, somebody's getting the upper hand, period.
Yeah.
So every time. I truly believe that every time.
Right. Yeah. And it's crazy that I'm sure there's even still to this day probably deals that going down in disc golf that shouldn't without the presence of a lawyer.
100%.
But because like I also wanted to ask, like, even for your experience, like, how much has things changed just in the contract process since your very first deal way back to now? Like, what is like the difference between those two experiences? I'm sure it's black and white.
Luckily for me, it hasn't been that different, because I've known the guys at Discraft since they were my first ever sponsor in 2006 after AM World. From 2006 until I signed, Mike Wagner was one of my best friends. Through all my different teams. I would stay at his house. When we would go to Michigan, like, that was one of my good friends. So luckily, it didn't change very much, even though it went from like 25 discs to, potentially millions of dollars.
Right.
Like, it never changed, which I was lucky because of the relationships that I've had and been able to keep through the duration of my career. I mean, that's a lot of 17 years is a lot of trust. Now, obviously, a lawyer was involved, but the process was very smooth. Now, if it was something else, couldn't even imagine like being that nervous to sign something.
Yeah, definitely. It can be very scary when you know that it's not just and I think you mentioned this in one of your interviews with Chris from Disc Law. And it was not only are you committing money or committing a payment to you with a contract that you're going to receive, it's also time. Like that's years of your life that you're talking about. So it's no small joke when you're thinking, I'm putting this pen to paper and it's going to change maybe the next 4 or 5 years of my life. Like this contract is binding me for that amount of time. And when you think about it like that, there's no doubt that you need to have a full understanding of what's going on when you sign that contract. 100%. But yeah, Paul, that's kind of all I wanted to cover. I think it was great hearing from you. I'm glad to see that you really align with a lot of the things, especially with the coaching that I would like to see in the sport. It was really great hearing about that. And thanks so much for just joining the show and sharing that with us.
Hey, no problem, man. I appreciate it. I watch every single one of your interviews. I love what you guys are doing over there. Keep the grind up, man, and hopefully I'll be on again sometime soon.
Awesome. All right, and thanks once again to Paul for joining the show. It was great hearing about all the things that he has planned for the future disc golf, as well as getting some of those great stories about the early tour grind and how crazy that was. Once again, make sure you're here next Thursday for another great interview. We'll see you next time.